really crazy stuff continues to happen out there with regard to these countries moving away from the dollar. If you guys haven't seen that video we did a couple of weeks ago about Kevin O'Leary saying that the dollar was fine, it be okay. Much ado about nothing in terms of all these smaller countries moving away from the dollar. And we said Kevin O'Leary was wrong, and he is wrong. Okay, but no one can damage the United States like the United States can. And we're in the process of doing just that. This is amazing after the blowback that we've received as a country from all of these sanctions. It is amazing that we're at a point where our Congress, our lawmakers are doubling down on this stuff, even in light of what we've seen. So it's like, when you are 6 feet in a hole and you look and you got a shovel in your hand, it's time to put the shovel down. But no, they've got the shovel and they are furiously digging us deeper into a hole. We've been talking about these sanctions that have been levied on Russia and the fallout from that in terms of all of these countries backing away from the US dollar and aligning with the BRICS nations, the Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. BRICS is growing like a weed. They've got 20 applications sitting, waiting. We also did the video about France. Emmanuel Macron is making overtures to the South African president, Cyril Ramaphosa, to, hey, can I come to the next BRICS meeting? Okay. Can I get in on this? Maybe. I don't know how they're going to react to that, seeing as France is a part of NATO and the G7, but he's certainly making overtures. That's the United States' oldest ally, okay? Helped us out in the Revolutionary War. Now, trying to cleave itself away and not be as dependent on the Western economic hegemony. So knowing all this, knowing the fallout of the sanctions and seeing all of these countries back away from the United States of America, what is the response? What do you think the response of the Congress would be? Do you think they say, well, let's slow down on these sanctions a little bit? They're even talking about sanctioning African countries for those countries' domestic policy. So you think they say, let's slow down on that a little bit because we're getting into territory that's going to hurt us? No, actually, what they've done recently is proposed a bill to give Russian central bank assets to Ukraine. They're not thinking two moves down the chessboard. Okay, so you're further eroding faith in the dollar. You're saying that anybody that possesses this dollar or assets in American central banks or in the American central bank, hey, we don't like what you do. We might take that from you and give it to one of our friends. Okay. A bipartisan, this is Democrats and Republicans that are thinking about this garbage. A bipartisan group of U.S. lawmakers introduced a piece of legislation last week, well, Thursday, this is Saturday, that would give President Biden the power to confiscate frozen Russian central bank assets and send them to Ukraine. Now, I don't care how you feel about the war. I don't care what side you come down on. This is bad economic policy for the States of America. The Rebuilding Economic Prosperity and Opportunity for Ukraine's Act, they're calling it the Repo for Ukraine's Act, was introduced in both the House and the Senate. All right. So not only bipartisan support, but bicameral support as well. According to the House Foreign Affairs Committee, the legislation would provide additional assistance to Ukraine using assets confiscated from the central bank of the Russian Federation and other sovereign assets of the Russian Federation. Okay. How do you do that? But they're thinking about doing just that. Now, some have alleged, I have no proof of this, but many have alleged that there's some malfeasance going on with all of this money flowing into Ukraine. All right. Remember, now this is a fact, and had Ukraine listed as the most corrupt country in the world before this whole thing started. All right. And where's this money flowing? Where is it going? Oh, we're sending it to Ukraine. Yeah, but what does that mean? Who in Ukraine? What in Ukraine? All right. These questions, are they being asked? The U.S. Justice Department has authorized the transfer of some private Russian assets to Ukraine. Uh, but taking funds from the Russian central bank would mark a significant escalation of Washington's economic war against Moscow. Yeah. Okay. If your neighbor comes into your house and opens, your freezer and takes out the $300 you got frozen in an ice cube, that's a hell of an escalation in your relationship, right? The legislation would also instruct President Biden to, quote, work with allies and partners to establish an international compensation mechanism to transfer confiscated frozen Russian sovereign assets to assist Ukraine. Again, I don't care where you come down on this war. Bad economic policy from the standpoint of how it will be viewed by the rest of the world, right? We got some videos coming up on the channel next week that are going to show you how these other countries and people like Kevin O'Leary are kind of laughing it off because they're saying, oh, who are these countries? And they're naming them. And no, there's no bigger economy on the block right now than China and the United States. But look, think about history. At one point, the British pound was the reserve currency, and people laughed at the thought of the dollar becoming the reserve currency. And here we are, right? So anything's possible. Will it happen tomorrow? No. Can it happen? Absolutely. European countries have been discussing the idea of using Russian assets to provide more funds to Ukraine, including investing in assets and sending Kyiv the returns. So get that. We're going to invest for you. And whatever we make, we're going to send it to you. Does that even sound right? Okay. The bill would also give the State Department additional resources to work with partners and allies abroad toward the goal of confiscation of additional Russian sovereign assets. Guys, go ahead and hit that like button if you can for me, please. This is, again, bipartisan, Republicans and Democrats. Remember, Lindsey Graham, and he sat right there in front of Volodymyr Zelensky, and he said, man, this is the best money we ever spent. That's what he said. Now, you should be able to trust the United States Senator to be able to articulate himself appropriately, right? So let's just say he said what he was thinking. He said what he meant. That was the best money the United States, had ever spent. That's what he said. Okay. Not the Apollo program, not I-95 and the highway system. No, money to Ukraine.